Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terry Ann Hyman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence in your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. This episode is being sponsored by Ritual and Shelter. Are you looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter online or in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics such as energy healing, crystal healing, Reiki, chakras, auras, the Akashic Records, shadow work, astrology, and earth-based healing. You can also find herbal teas and tinctures alongside their crystals and oils to help establish a mindful mindset and fluid ambience before meditation, ritual work, and reflection. Ritual and Shelter is dedicated to providing one-on-one, in-depth conversations with customers to help them find the most efficient healing methods and resources that match their unique interest and energy. They offer tarot sessions, Reiki, sound bowl, and crystal healing, and now they are offering witch consultations. Visit ritualshelter.com to book an appointment and bring peace back to the body, mind, and spirit. You can also find them on Instagram at Ritual Shelter Shop, as well as Pinterest at Ritual Plus Shelter. As this podcast goes to air, we're moving to the end of winter with spring right around the corner. The days are definitely getting longer. The light is shifting. We've moved through that time change. Weird, that one, right? And we're opening up to the energy that is ahead of us. So many changes. We still do have a little bit of that extreme weather. One day it's warm, one day it's chilly, and there are a lot of things blooming all around us. All that energy from the winter, all the dreams and the vision, the shadows are starting to open up into little bitty seeds that we will begin to plant as we open up to this new season. Cosmically, we're opening up to so much. We've already started entering into that eclipse season. So eclipses, they bring change like a roller coaster. We never quite know what's going to happen. We're also entering into the Mercury retrograde. We're in that shadow part. It will come around to this month. For pretty long, it feels like, all the way into April. So be prepared for that. And there's just so many things in the skies shifting and changing. So yeah, take a breath on that one for a moment. From that winter transition into spring, it is one of the hardest seasonal transitions. We've been deep, and now we're being asked to open up, and everything is stirring up. Lots of disruption out there, lots of things breaking down. It is creating a little havoc, right? Are you getting caught in all of the news media? Are you listening? Are you finding yourself going down that rabbit hole, sucked into the news and the protests and the disrespect and the disregard? It is challenging. It is upsetting. It is. But if we get caught in it and only go down that rabbit hole, it doesn't really help. We need to be careful how much TV we watch, how much we listen to, and instead spend some of that time tuning in to our own light, the messages of our soul. Because we need to continue to help each other. We don't need to isolate. And all too often we can do that. We can separate out, go down that loneliness, that feeling not connected. And sometimes, it does feel easier just to hide in bed under the covers. I know, I've been there. There are some mornings I just want to stay wrapped up, not even get out of bed. But I don't think that's too realistic. Do you? Can you agree that sometimes you want to do the same thing? Yeah, it is challenging right now. And it is easy to separate ourselves out, to feel lonely and isolated, especially if you're an empath. Right now, there are so many empaths hurting and carrying that weight and going down into that despair. We need empaths, but we don't need to be drained. We don't need to take on the energy of all that's going on. We need to be able to protect our energy and feel that we can make a difference with those emotions, with that caring and compassion that we have. So I had a Reiki session the other day on me. Yes, on me. I get sessions too. And while I was in the session, I was like floating. I totally left my body and allowed all that heavy stuff just to drop away. It felt so good to float, to release, and to let go. And this is what my clients say about their sessions too. They feel lighter. They let go. Sometimes we bring up excess energy and like, but then it clears away. It is important as you move through the seasonal transitions to let all this stuff go. You don't want to be walking around because guess what? You'll just accumulate more of the same, right? When was the last time you had an energy session, right? The seasonal transition is the time that we want to come fresh, realign our energy, start again. And spring is all about planting new seeds, new visions, new dreams. So if we have all this heavy energy, we don't want to plant that with the seeds, do we? No. So finding ways to work with your energy and to understand more and more about your path is really, really important. Y'all, my schedule is open for you. Schedule an energy session, in person, virtual, schedule a soul session. Let's talk about it. Right? You know, I have on my, I have a piece of artwork as you come into my healing studio. Let me get the quote for you. It's this beautiful artwork. And it says, most people don't know that there are angels whose only job is to make sure you don't get too comfortable and fall asleep and miss your life. Brian Andrews is the artist. It's this little angel that stands outside in such a good point. So sometimes we feel the despair or nothing's working. Maybe you are being nudged to go deeper within, to uncover the past that can help you. So many times we think, it didn't work out, nothing's happening. But if we go a little deeper, I can speak from this, we can find other experiences that come up that take us in new places. And generally, it's always better. But when we stay stuck and stay in that same pattern over and over, it's draining. It's debilitating. All too often it leads to desperation, giving up. But energy sessions, soul sessions can help you tune in. What are those messages that your soul wants you to know? What is it that's going on, the struggles? So back by popular demand, I am offering a master class, The Aura of an Empath. I think it's so important right now. You understand your aura and how you can work with it and how you can understand what creates the aura, how you can create better boundaries, and how you work with interactions as an aura, even in humanity. I'll be expanding that on this masterclass this time, like even when you're sleeping, what we want to do to help us, especially as empaths. Because again, we need empathic people. We need people with heart, with care, with compassion, but we need them with strong energy boundaries. So if you are an empath, or maybe you feel a little lost or struggling right now, you can also schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me, and let's talk. Let's talk about what is needed, what you can do to start that journey for you, and tune in to those messages of your soul. I will put all the links in the show notes. So in today's episode, we take a look at two of my favorite things, astrology and the oracles. So my guest is Jonathan Waller, and his work is Archetypal Astrology Oracle. He has this beautiful deck that he has created based on the idea of archetypal astrology and oracle cards. He brings them both together. So in his deck, he talks about archetypes and how they are associated with the different planets in the solar system and with us as well. He includes different spiritual lessons and challenges that relate to the different archetypes, and he invites you to discover and deepen your relationship to the oracles, the cosmos, and your inner light as well. Drawing insights from Jungian and contemporary psychology, current psychedelic therapy research, and the work of Stanislav Grof, this oracle can be used for divination, aiding dream work, helping you to understand your archetypal astrology chart for deeper insight. And in this episode, we talk about astrology, archetypal astrology, the sun, the moon, the planets, and how this system relates to helping you understand the different elements of life and drawing connections between yourself, your life, your spirit, the cosmos, and the world, all within and around us as well. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pause, center, and set an intention for where you are right now. So wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes. Taking a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, call all your energy into you. Call it in. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, feel your energy aligning. Call in the spiritual body right on top of the emotional, mental, physical layers, all centering, grounding. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, calling in absolute light, streams of grace to wash through you, opening up your radiance. Inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, dropping right into the heart, right into the deepest part of your heart. Feel that connection with your spirit and the greater spirit. Know that you are loved, guided, protected. Feeling all this energy coming in around us as we call in the Reiki masters, the teachers that have come before us, calling in the archangels to open our heart with love and joy, calling in the crystal beings to surround us with amusement, magnification, calling in your higher self right above the crown to receive these messages for you. Taking a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, right here into the heart, taking a moment, noticing where you are on this great wheel of life as we go to transition in the seasons. Noticing your path, your light. Feeling those intentions coming forward for this new season. See and hear and feel and know these intentions. Taking another deep inhale right into the heart. And as you exhale, setting that intention right through your aura, empowering it with the energy of Reiki, Shokure, 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 setting that energy for you. Taking one more deep inhale and exhale, coming back, grounding, centering. Feel the heart open. Feel that third eye illuminating. And as you're ready, blinking the eyes back open, coming back. So my guest today, Jonathan Waller, is a respected archetypal astrologer, life coach, visual artist, essayist, and poet. He is the co-host of Awakenings, the Archetypal Astrology podcast. Jonathan lives in Southwest England. He likes trees, vegan foods, basketball hammocks, chess, hot tubs, cold showers, and long walks by the seaside. So let us welcome Jonathan to the show. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, Terry. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. It's a real pleasure. And yeah, just want to express some gratitude to you for your interest in my work and to your listeners as well. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I love astrology, as I mentioned before, and how exciting to have it in the form of an oracle deck. Beautiful cards, really helping us to understand more. Archetypal Astrology Oracle. How exciting.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's an exciting time for me as well.
So what led you to creating this oracle deck right now?
I started off my kind of client work more as a life coach, running men's groups, working one-on-one with people, not necessarily in a particularly spiritual or kind of archetypal way. And the interest in astrology has just been growing and growing for years now. And I've just been, gradually integrating more and more astrological practice into my own work, and learning a lot from, especially from Ren Butler, who years ago, I first time I took his archetypal astrology course. And yeah, I mean, it's a funny story, really, how I ended up doing this, creating this deck, because I made the images all with Midjourney AI, which is for some people, a lot, maybe a bit more controversial. And I certainly, as the years go by, have more and more mixed feelings about it. But when it first arrived, the AI art thing on the scene, you know, I just, it was a toy basically. It was play, and I just got my hands on a free trial. And if you're an astrologer, and you're interested in archetypes, then the first thing you're going to do when you have access to something like that is start trying to depict the archetypes and their different combinations, and we can get more into what I mean by that.
Well, let's ask that question.
Yeah,
Like, what is an archetype? Let's start there, and then we'll move into archetypal astrology. What is an archetype for you?
sure. Yeah. Um, well, an archetype, in the astrological sense, um, we would say that the planets have archetypes associated with them. Each one, the sun and moon, and each of the planets in the solar system. And other astrologers who focus more on the signs and houses might say that those are archetypes as well. You know, in the most simple sense, we can look at them as categories. You know, the sun, for example, has to do with vitality and energy and light, obviously, and warmth. And it seems to have to do with the more masculine part of our being. And it seems to have to do with fatherhood and career and everything that happens in the external world. Now, without the kind of archetypal astrological lens, you might not group all those things together into one category. Um, what's useful about this archetypal astrological system is that it helps us to take all the different elements of life and draw connections between them. So yeah, I don't get too complex about what an archetype is. You know, we can talk about what it's been historically and how, you know, for we can talk about, you know, Plato's archetypes and these kind of timeless ideas that exist outside of time, or we might talk about Jungian archetypes, you know, things like the shadow and the ego. You know, Jung would have said that um, archetypes are like psychological prerequisites of our experience, things that kind of have to be there in the psyche in order, excuse me, for us to experience the world. When we take a more astrological view, yeah, it seems, and we can study the planetary cycles and the historical happenings over many decades and centuries, and we can look at people's birth charts and start to get a sense of how the planets themselves and the way that they move around in the solar system and the kind of geometric you know, alignments that they make with each other seem to indicate that there are categories of experience or archetypes that are associated with those different planetary bodies.
So let's talk a minute about how, as you're already kind of going into, like, what is archetypal astrology and how is that different from other forms of astrology?
Yeah, the main thing that sets archetypal astrology apart from other schools, it's quite a new school of astrology, I should say. It's more or less based on the work of Richard Tarnas, who, and I highly recommend people go and check out his work, his book Cosmos and Psyche, and he's got a lot of great lectures available for people to look at. Basically, the main idea is we just focus on the planets themselves. So we just we it's not that the signs and houses and asteroids and fixed stars and all the other elements that most schools of astrology would include, it's not that they're considered unimportant or meaningless. You know, everything in the universe has meaning. You know, there's a synchronistic connection between all bodies and events and beings. I believe that. But just by confining the astrological study to the planets and the aspects or alignments that they make with each other, it provides a more, in a way, a more simple and straightforward way to practice astrology, and one that's that everyone at least can agree upon. So, for example, many schools of astrology use a sidereal zodiac. Um, probably most astrologers in the world use a sidereal zodiac, which uses the actual positions of the stars in the sky to determine where the signs are in the chart. Um, Most of us in the West use a tropical zodiac, which is more, it's a depiction of where the where we put the signs are. Not to get too technical about it, but is in a different place because it's kind of set from when that system was invented, um, you know, thousands of years ago. And so the way that we practice astrology with the tropical zodiac using the signs is more of a indication of our place in the seasonal cycles of this planet. So both of those can be valid approaches, but there's kind of disagreement, about what's where and what's important and what should we be paying attention to. But all astrologers agree, more or less, that the planets represent the kind of core tenets of experience, the core facets of our personality. And by studying the way that they interact, we can actually get a lot done. And many astrologers might want to add more nuance and make things more specific by also including other sets of symbols like the signs and the houses. But in archetypal astrology, we kind of try to focus more on the planets and their aspects, which rather than quickly moving on to include some other set of symbols.
So it is still all based, though, on your time of birth, right? We still keep that aspect to it.
One of the advantages is that we don't need a precise time of birth. So a lot of people don't know
Huh.
their precise time of birth. If you're using houses, then you really need a precise time of birth. If you're just using the aspects, then a rough time is absolutely fine. But certainly the date and the rough time is important. The date most.
Location?
Location is somewhat important in archetypal astrology, but again, if you don't know where you're born, then it's not. I could still very happily do a reading for somebody in that situation, which kind of opens it up a little bit for more people, which is nice.
Well, I have to say that's the first time I've heard that because it's always been you have to know exact time. And I know I had the wrong time for a while and switched it and kind of changed some of it. Yeah. So, how very interesting. Yeah. That you
Mm,
can still look a lot at this. I know in one of my groups right now, my Celtic group, we're looking at the energy of Neptune.
mm.
So, I think this is kind of what you're talking about. What does Neptune represent and how does it show up in our lives? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, Neptune's kind of the archetype of the spirit itself, in my view. It's the archetype of transcendence, and it has to do with our spiritual lives. It on the shadow side, all of these things have positive and negative dimensions to them. It can have to do with fantasy, which can be nice, but also can have to do with kind of clouded thinking or delusion. In a nutshell, that's what it is to me. But yeah, Neptune helps us to dissolve the boundaries of whatever it's interacting with. So, right now in the sky, there's a conjunction between Saturn and Neptune that's been going on for just over a year and will last another kind of year and a half. So Saturn, conversely, is the planet of it's the archetype that rules over what I've heard you call the 3D world, the material world, the incarnate plane with all of its pressures and demands.
Look at it as responsibilities, my to-dos, right? Keeping me on
Mm,
track, right? That
yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So with that in mind, which is very helpful to understand where you're coming from with this, let's talk a little bit about the deck. How have you arranged the deck and how do we use it?
Yeah, thank you. The deck itself is 55 cards. So that's one for each of the planets, um, and then one for each pair of planets. So or dyad. So you've got Sun, Moon, and Mercury all the way through to Pluto, and then the next one after that is the Sun Moon pair, and then Sun Mercury, Sun Venus, and so on, all the way through to Neptune Pluto. So there's one for every possible combination of two planets. And you can use the deck in lots of different ways. For people who are big fans of divination or tarot or just oracle decks in general, you can totally use it. Um, just by any way that you would use a deck normally. You could pull a card on any given day, or you could ask a question, pull a card, pull a series of cards. Um, you can totally use it in that way. Um, if it's also designed as a learning tool for archetypal astrology, or even if you're primarily interested in other types of astrology, it's designed as a learning tool to cover the fundamental like tenets of astrology in general. So for people who are interested in learning about astrology, it can be good. And then if you're already if you have an astrological practice, and you kind of know what's going on for you transit wise, then you can use the deck to kind of enhance your relationship with the transits, help you to work with them. Something I do if I have say we're talking about Saturn Neptune, if I have a Saturn Neptune transit going on, which I do as well as there being a world transit, then I'll get the Saturn card and the Neptune card, and place them on the left and right, and put the Saturn Neptune card in the middle, and just display them somewhere to remind me that that energy is happening. And then you can read the chapters in the book which have some stuff about the kind of gifts and challenges that come with those transits, and then some invitations, which is some suggested activities or practices or just things you can do to kind of intentionally deepen your relationship with those archetypes.
Yeah. I noticed some poetry in there too.
Yeah, that's my original poetry. How did you find it?
I drew a card. It was when I first got the deck, and so I read it, was looking at it, and I thought that was interesting. Yeah, so I love it that it's your poetry as well. Yeah. Now I want to ask you another question, then we're going to draw a card and talk about it. You bring in the idea as an integration tool for psychedelic work. Where does this come into play?
I'll try not to go on too long about it, but the origin of archetypal astrology actually is kind of fundamentally linked with the early kind of work of some psychedelic therapy pioneers, in particular Stanislav Grof. So him and Richard Tarnas, who at the time was not an astrologer, were working at Esalen in the 70s, trying to understand the correlations or lack thereof between many different people's experience of LSD therapy. By this time, Grof had a huge backlog of case files from the many sessions that he'd facilitated. So they were trying to find some way of predicting, what kind of experience someone might have, or just even making sense of why is it that two people can take the same dosage of the same substance on the same day and have such radically different experiences. One person might go from being an atheist who radically rejects all spirituality to suddenly desiring a spiritual path in their life. Someone else might go from being a devout religious person to losing faith in their particular brand of spirituality. So they were trying to make sense of that, and someone suggested to them both, why don't you check out people's birth charts and their transits? And they were desperate by that point, so they did check it out.
Interesting.
So much of Richard Tarnas he's done a lot of historical research and a lot of birth chart research, but also a lot of personal in-depth inner research, making friends with the archetypes in that way. And it's a big part of how Ren, my kind of teacher and mentor, teaches astrology. So it's always a fundamental part, and a lot of the people I do readings with are involved in that kind of work. And the astrological language gives them some useful ways to understand and talk about the things that happen for them in their deep self-exploration.
I interviewed Stan Metzner's wife about his work, and she was an astrologer, and he was too. He was both. And so his work with that, she didn't really talk about the astrology and psychedelics, but we did talk about his life and his studies and some of his work out at Echelon with Groff, which is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Mm.
So how interesting to bring that forward as well. So I don't look at astrology as predictive. I look at it as more as projection. How would you say you look at it?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good. Thank you for inviting that inquiry. Um, I would say that astrology is not concretely predictive, just because the archetypes are, by their nature, unspecific. They're specific enough categories that they're discernible. You know, you can tell one from another. You can say, "Oh, that's Mars, and that's Saturn, and that's Neptune." Um, but even so, they're quite broad categories still. So just because a transit is happening does not mean that any one specific thing is going to happen. And I would steer away personally from trying to live my life in that way, trying to peer into the future and know in advance what's going to happen. I feel like that would be a waste of a human life. For me, I don't mean to demean anyone else's practice,
No, I
but
think it is all up to, how we interpret it. I think always your astrologers are too, how it's being interpreted. And I'd use it as more of a guideline. I know my daughter, she is like, for word, my astrologer said. And, for her, that's how it kind of comes in for her. And it's been very helpful in her life too. So I think it is up to interpretation, but I do think we always have free will. And if we only wait for what they say, sometimes we can miss what is actually there for us too. We never know. Yeah.
yeah,
So thank you
yeah.
for that. I think it's a good way to look at life. And I've used it for many years. And sometimes I
Mm,
think like, what the heck? And sometimes like, yep, right on, right?
mm,
I know I recently had a woman on from the UK as well. Her book was about making astrology easy. And
mm,
she kept telling me, you have to get visible. You have to get visible. You have to put your podcast on video. And I kind of like said, oh gosh, I can't. And then I did. And then this other opportunity opened up. So it was one of these things where I really went in and kind of listened to what she said. And then not really thinking about it, it all opened up. So sometimes, you know what? Some of that work is there for us to really kind of interpret in the way that we need to. I've
mm,
also had astrologers on about the shadow part of our astrology charts too, which is pretty
mm,
interesting as well, right? So there are many ways. But I do think all of it helps us to look more into our soul and the blueprint that we come in with in this lifetime. And then there are many astrologies too that can go back into past lives and reincarnation and what you bring forward, right?
mm.
Let's draw a card. Let's see what comes up for the listeners of the
Sure.
podcast. All right. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
mix them up and you're going to tell me when to stop mixing them up. Everybody take a
Mm.
breath, drop into the heart.
All right. Go for it.
All right. Here we go. What do we need to hear right now? That's what I drew already this morning. Saturn, Pluto.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Powerful
that was what
card.
yeah. Yeah, how funny it came back around. 52.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I guess it's interesting times that we live in, right? Um, I think the quote that goes along with that card from the book, I believe is from Stan Groff. I'll paraphrase it. I haven't got it memorized, but he kind of says that the transformation of humanity may be the only hope we have for navigating a time such as this. Um, and so Saturn is the archetype, like you said, of responsibilities and your to-do list and a lot of mundane stuff. But it's also the archetype of consequences, Saturn is a harvest god, so it's you reap what you sow, it's the chickens coming home to roost. And any things that have been left undone that should have been done, when a Saturn transit comes along, you find out about it or you're forced to encounter it. So that's Saturn. And then Pluto is kind of the prime mover in my view of all kind of action in the universe. It's the Kundalini energy. It's a very powerful force, and whatever Pluto is interacting with gets kind of driven into the foreground of our experience in a really unavoidable way. It brings urgency. So you know, in Groff's world, I don't know if you're familiar, or some of your listeners hopefully will be, but these two archetypes would be associated with the stages of labor that have to do with, you know, the initially Saturn would be associated with the onset of labor, when the chemical balance of the womb changes and it goes from being a kind of perfect, ideal environment to being a somewhat hostile environment that, if the baby stays there, will eventually kill it, you know. So then there's a feeling of being trapped with Saturn, being stuck, being yeah, a kind of cut off as well. There can be a sense of being cut off from something good. But then Pluto is the next stage of labor, where we're in the birth canal, and there's a lot of fear and danger and doubt associated with that. But there's also a light at the end of the tunnel, and there's movement, and there's a sense that if we just keep going, then we'll get through it. So all that to say, on the collective level, you know, we had a conjunction of Saturn and Pluto that precisely coincided with the pandemic. So a lot of big Saturnian words, and lockdown is a funny manifestation. Not funny for the people at the time, but just how on the nose it is. You know, lock is a real Saturnian word, and down, that's the Pluto direction. It encourages us to go down into the psyche, into the unconscious. You know, go find all the things that have been rejected or repressed or denied. So hopefully, you know, hopefully we navigate. We're certainly in a time where cultural rebirth is on the cards, and hopefully we get there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty apropos for where we are in our country right now, because we have a lot of the shadow coming up, and we have a lot of, even, you know, going back to when that pandemic was and who was in office, right? We have a lot of that energy going on. And I think the message of like, do the work and, you know, hold the light and keep moving through it is exactly what we need to hear right now. Don't give up. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Like, just kind of really hold true to your values right now, right? And let the Saturn hold true, but let the Pluto break up some of the other stuff. So I think it's very true. And if I could, I would like to just share the poem that you wrote about it.
Oh, thank you.
They say time devours all things, but say nothing about what becomes of the things as time digests them. What if life is consummated only by the way that time consumes it? What if to live is to be devoured by time and recycled? Life is a cycle. It really is. Things come back around and go out and come back around. It's like that wheel of fortune of the tarot. Let's move that wheel. That's kind of where I'm at right now, for sure. Yeah. So as you put this deck out, how beautiful. Thanks for the drawing and for the interpretation, because I think we all need to look at that. What is your purpose? What is your mission with the deck?
I'm not sure if I have a straightforward answer to that question, but I can say a few things. You know, I've really benefited personally from coming into contact with this school of astrology, and I hope that other people can as well. I want to make it more accessible and more widely known. You know, and I want the deck as well to, astrology can often just be a lot of words. You know, you have your reading and it's all words, right? And it's all about what you do with the words afterwards, but not everybody responds that well to this very wordy discipline, and it can get very complex. So I wanted to, part of the reason the poetry is in there, obviously the poetry is made of words, but the poetry is in there to kind of bypass some of the intellectual stuff and get to a more straightforward, immediate reaction. And that's the idea with the images as well. You know, when you look at that Saturn Pluto card, it creates a feeling that before you even read anything in the book about, you know, there's a lot of analysis and interpretation and stuff in there as well. But before you even get to that, you know, you've got an embodied sense if you allow it to arise. So yeah, it's my hope that that helps people to learn about astrology and to integrate it into their lives. Um, because I believe that's just a really beneficial, um, path that people can be on, and also a very open one that allows for a lot of different types of people to benefit. With whatever kind of spiritual background you have, whatever kind of practice you have. I believe it's not prescriptive. What's in the deck and what's in that book, and yeah, that's a big part of it for me. So
Yeah, and I think I would just kind of emphasize too, one of the things that struck me right away was that this is a great learning tool. Yeah, so we will definitely give a shout out to Inner Traditions for publishing the deck for sure. And where can I direct people to find your work? Are you teaching? You said you had some leadership groups.
I've been running a course called Soul Work at the end of last year, which is a kind of group therapy slash astrological learning container. I'm not sure when the next cohort of that will be, but people can keep an eye out for that if they like. I have a website. It's johnwallercoach.com, JONWALLER coach.com, which has lots of information about the readings that I offer. I do a write up of people's charts if that's what they would like as well, including lots of artwork and images and poetry, just like is in the book. You can kind of have a bespoke deck of your own almost. So I invite people to check that out. You can find me on Substack at John Waller Astrologer if you want to see what I'm writing sort of week to week. Yeah, that'll probably do it.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm on Substack too. Yeah, excellent. So as we go to close, I do like to come back and ask, how do you feel that working with this deck, the archetypal astrology, the oracles, can help to empower the spirit right now?
It's a great question. I'll start by saying I think that something that's become clearer and clearer to me the more people I work with is that this archetypal system, it helps people to be able to approach every aspect of their lives as a spiritual act. If that's what you want, no pressure. But I tell people, oh, it's your Venus return on this day or that day. So that's like an extra birthday when Venus comes back to the place in the sky where it was when you were born. And on that day, maybe eating a piece of cake, if approached with the right mindset, can be a spiritual practice, or, something as simple as, having a bath or connecting with friends. It's not just something that we do out of habit. It's something that we do because we want to honor a part of ourselves. And if it's a Mars transit, then, you can approach your exercise routine or go to a axe throwing workshop or, anything, something that you might do for fun, dance, but again, it's not just something that you do on impulse. It's something that you do because you want to develop and honor a part of yourself and also a part of the cosmos. And so you can do that with all the archetypes. And once you add that all up, what that adds up to is a whole life lived with that intention. And then the other part of that is when you start to live in that way, even if it's only little by little, you start to notice that that you live in an ensouled living cosmos, that the universe is not a kind of empty, cold, inert place that's kind of there for the conquering. It's a living being, and you start to recognize the animacy of it and the privilege of being here. And so
Yeah.
hopefully that answers the question.
Intentional acts of spiritual connections with the cosmos for our everyday life. How powerful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. All the best with your work. I'm very excited for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great
To your
speak.
spirit. It is time to seek help, to find ways to connect with your soul. The cards can offer you intentional acts of spiritual connections with the cosmos, your soul, for your everyday life. We need to get out of the box we put ourselves in. We need to open up with color, sound, light, art. This is the medicine of the future, and the future is here. We can't keep doing the same things over and over expecting new results. When was the last time you had an energy session? Or maybe the question is, have you ever had an energy session? What about an astrology reading? There are so many ways that you can connect with the messages of your soul. Be sure to check out Jonathan's work, and I extend my offer to you. Schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me, and let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on, your path, your spiritual practice, and what you can do to step forward right now. I'll put all the links for the Aura Masterclass, for a session, for a call in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and now you can watch the episode on YouTube as well. I am your host, Terry Ann Hyman. To your spirit, namaste. In the local area of Birmingham, 2 opportunities to celebrate the new season. First, on March 20th, the equinox. Come join us for a spring equinox celebration at Clubhouse on Highland, along with Wolf Therapy and the Vibrant Heart Collective. We'll have some art going on. We'll talk about intention settings. We'll do some meditation, colors, sound bowls, fire circle, cacao, and even a tarot storytelling time. And the second event is a spring sound bath on March 22nd at the Yoga Circle. Paul Wolf and I will be bringing the bowls, the gong, the koshi chimes, and a quartz triangle too to create a bath of sound. Find all the details on my website at terryandhyman.com. And I'll drop the links in the show notes as well.